2 years ago, or a year ago. So, and they also screened it at the UCT Film Festival. So if you have seen it, then I apologize, but now's a good chance. 11:30 tomorrow, and you also see my mug on the video a couple of times, talking about skin. And
sorry.
Yes?
Any chance of it being repeated the following week?
That you will have to speak to the organizers about. So maybe I can ask them. If you unfortunately if you aren't able to view it, I can ask them. I certainly can. So I'll raise that with them. Okay. The second announcement is that these slides and these lectures are being recorded, as far as I know. There they are. And the slides themselves, I will package for Finola. And I said to her that I will make it available at the end of summer school. So please, her office is quite strained at the moment. I'm supposed to whisper that, but I'm on the mic. Her office is quite strained, so if you don't mind not hassling her for it this week, but we certainly will have it prepared by the end of summer school, and then she can obviously release it to you in that fashion. And then thirdly, I said 2 notices, but there's actually a third. The third notice is that I am currently also involved in an American documentary on skin and on skin lightening practices. And tomorrow, I will talk quite a lot on skin lightening practices and its implications in South Africa and the watchdog associations that look after it and how they're not doing a great job. The film crew from the States are actually here at the moment in Cape Town. And so they have asked permission, and I've run it by Finola and Madi, and they've agreed for them to come in and film. What I do need to ask is your permission. If they were to come in and film, they could only film me, or they could do a quick pan around the room and actually get your faces, possibly, in on the documentary as well. Now, I say that because, you know, I'm sure there are no hardened criminals sitting in the audience. But if you are, I don't judge. But what I do need to know, just by a show of hands, is if you're okay with that. They will most likely just be a few minutes, sort of 5 or 10 minutes, which is they just need a few clips, and for you not to be distracted. You could also potentially be seen by a talent scout in the States if you do appear in it. So is that okay with everyone? Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. No, it's not on YouTube as far as I know. I haven't actually checked. That's a good point. It should be on via the Film and Media Archive, via UCT's Film and Media Archives, though. They do store it there. So we can also check on that. Thanks. Thanks for reminding me. Right, folks, so welcome to lecture 2. What I want to ask is, are we skin thinking yet? Have we gone home and actually thought about our skins for once in our lives? So that's great. So 1/3 of my job is done, and that is to get you more aware of your skin. Today we look a little bit at the skin itself, and we talk quite a lot about the environmental factors that actually damage the skin, and how we can sort of safeguard against it. And unfortunately, we all live in the outdoors, and Cape Town is such a wonderful outdoor place. So is Durban, for example. Everyone wants to come here, remarkably. And I found myself in December trying to find a CA registration amongst all the GP registrations. But that's just my own story. Okay, so I want to kick off again just reminding you about the 3 layers. And this is by no means a test, because I was actually going to block all these out and ask. No, I'm joking. We have the skin in 3 layers, the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. And these 2 layers The hypodermis is very important, don't get me wrong. It does vary depending on the area of your skin that you look at. But the dermis and the epidermis are the two essential layers that we're really going to concentrate on today, because it is in those layers that the damage and the repair and the damage occur. So once again, just by revision, and I was very happy for the lady in the front here that asked me about the cement bags. Okay, so please, when you speak to your friends, don't tell them they've got bags under their eyes, because that might be insulting. We're talking an analogy between cement bags and the pockets that contain the pigment. Okay, and I said yesterday that these pockets, or these bags, let's call them bags, that contain the pigment are called melanosomes. And those melanosomes, just to remind you, are moved up the dendrites, moved along the dendrites, and they are transferred into the keratinocytes. Now, the color that you see on your skin is in fact the transferred melanosomes sitting in the keratinocytes. Why? Because the surface of the skin that you see are all keratinocytes. Okay? About 8 or 9 layers further down of keratinocytes, we start to get the melanocytes. All right? And so that is why the melanocytes and the ratios that we have in our skin, in the lower layers, we have about 1 melanocyte to 6 keratinocytes. Okay? So that 1 melanocyte can stretch out with about 6 arms to reach keratinocytes. As we move up in the layers towards the surface, that ratio changes from 1 melanocyte to about 36 keratinocytes. So that 1 melanocyte can actually touch quite a lot of keratinocytes' lives. Okay? And so that 1 melanocyte, as we go higher, and that's why these dendrites are so important, because they can reach extensive lengths and transfer these melanosomes. So the melanosomes themselves, and how the pigment is actually made. So the pigment is made within the melanosome. I showed that yesterday. And if you look at the substructure of the melanosome, the pigment is not liquid. Okay? The pigment is a compound. It's almost a highly indestructible compound. We tried to destroy it many times in the lab, and you cannot. It is a thick sort of, when you have a lot of it, it's a thick, gooey compound, and it is then deposited within the melanosome. And if you look at the substructure, the melanosome itself, like a bag, has these shelves in them, and the melanin is deposited on these shelves. More melanin, of course, the darker the melanosome, and so forth. The melanosomes, interestingly, their shapes change from skin color to skin color. And so some skin have more rounded melanosomes, other skins have elliptical, other skins have more oval shaped, and that's just the nature of the melanosomes in the skin. And so these are transferred and they are accumulated, and that is how we produce the color. Now, I'm giving you this information because it's going to be important to show you that it is these bags, and remember this is in 3 dimensions, and so this is actually a circle, right? The cells are a circle or an oval. These bags actually float around in the cell after transfer, and they can move. They don't just float free, they actually move on the railings within the cell. Okay? And so there are rails, and then the cell has control of these rails, unlike sand rail in South Africa. But the cell can control these melanosomes and move them from the middle of the cell to the outside of the cell, to the periphery of the cell, etc. And it is during the times of high UV radiation that the cells respond by moving these melanosomes right over the nucleus, okay? And we'll get back to that, because it is these melanosomes containing the pigment melanin that protects the nuclear material by all costs after UV irradiation or during UV radiation. So, and I also reminded you yesterday about the fact that these are transferred and that we get the Fitzpatrick skin scale. But now we ask, what happens if you do not get melanin pigment, right? Well, what is the consequence of not getting pigment? And you remember that yesterday I said you could do a number of things not to get pigment. You could stop the pigment production, right at the start, so that you get a bag without the pigment in it. So it's a perfect bag, but there's no pigment in it. You could stop the transfer of the bag to the keratinocyte. So it literally just it literally stays in the melanocyte and it does nothing, right? The melanocyte will eventually break it down. So it stays in the melanocyte, it does not get transferred, and so you don't get pigment, okay? Or you can move it up along the dendrites, but there may be something wrong with the rail that actually moves the melanosomes along the dendrites. And if there's, and this is, I'm introducing all the genetic mutations that can occur. If you have a genetic mutation that affects the rails, then you don't get the movement of the melanosomes. And so you have the same problem of no color. In albinism, and we have to differentiate between albinism and vitiligo. You're going to hear what vitiligo is. Albinism is a genetic disorder, okay? And as opposed to vitiligo, which we call is an acquired disorder. There are no genetics involved. So albinism is genetic, and the one enzyme that we spoke about yesterday, tyrosinase, is mutated. Now, if tyrosinase is not functional, you do not get the start of the making of the pigment. So you still get perfect bags, you just don't get pigment in them. And so you get various types of albinos, but the most common type, and particularly in our country, and my colleague in Johannesburg has done a lot of work on albinos and albinism, you get the tyrosinase negative albinism, okay, which means that tyrosinase is mutated and not functional, and so you don't get pigment being formed. And as we said, you lose pigment in your hair, you lose pigment in your skin, you lose pigment in your eyes. And so albinism is one of those that is genetically a pigmentary disorder. The other disorder is vitiligo. Now, vitiligo is not genetic, okay? It is acquired, it happens, it comes on, as they say. It reflects, generally, if you are going to get vitiligo, you'll probably get it in your teens, which is sad for those who get it. And what happens is that it is defined as a disappearance of melanocytes, right? So the melanocytes, the actual factories, disappear. But you don't get an overall disappearance like in albinism, okay? And so what happens is that you start to get a spot, and it is a light spot, and the spot starts to grow. And what happens generally is that people look at the spot, they'll see it, and they won't worry about it. Until, unfortunately, the spot grows and grows a bit more, and now suddenly you're noticing it. Okay, you get various forms of vitiligo. One of the forms is a symmetrical form, and it's incredible. If you look at, she actually has the symmetrical form. If I were to halve her body right there, you can see that it's virtually reflective on the one side to the other one. So that is symmetrical vitiligo. You also get asymmetrical vitiligo. But in symmetrical vitiligo, if a spot started, you can see here, if a spot started here, a spot will start on the other half of the body. Okay, if a spot starts on this hand, it will start on this hand. As they grow, you now become sensitive to it, and you suddenly start to notice it, and it starts to stress you out. Unfortunately, stress is one of the highest factors that drive vitiligo. And so stress, and particularly oxidative stress at a biological level, it drives vitiligo. The good thing is that, and this is why we make the point of differentiating between vitiligo and albinism, that albinism is a genetic disease, and until the day arrives where we can change the genes in the fetus, and I can tell you that is around the corner, folks, until we can change a mutated gene in the fetus through gene therapy, we won't be able to solve the albinism problem. In vitiligo, however, because it's acquired, there is therapy available. And the dermatology clinic at Groote Hospital, for example, has a vitiligo clinic every Tuesday. And if you've got friends that are suffering from vitiligo, you can tell them there's very good hope. They do lots of therapy. One of the chief things that they speak to people about is about the stress levels, okay? Because work stresses, life stresses, boyfriend, girlfriend stresses, etc., all contribute to the overall oxidative stress that drives vitiligo spreading. And so my lab particularly has been involved in looking, and I'll show you, I think on Thursday, I'll show you a treatment that we did via my lab of a little 12-year-old boy who has vitiligo, and it worked particularly well. Now, everyone always asks me, why is there a picture of Michael Jackson right there? That's Michael Jackson, for those who don't know. Michael, or MJ, as he was affectionately known, had vitiligo, okay? And now people always ask me, the next question is, how do you know? Well, I know because I actually spoke to Michael Jackson's dermatologist. I kid you not. She's a lady, a very dynamic lady. I spoke to her at a conference, and before anyone could get to her, I actually had found out, and she doesn't advertise, but I had found out that she was one of his dermatologists. I ran up to her and I said, "Hi, I'm from South Africa. Does Michael Jackson have vitiligo?" And she looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, "Does Michael Jackson have vitiligo? I need to ask you quickly so that nobody else hears, but I just need to know." And she said, "Yes, you didn't hear from me." Right? And so that was all I needed. Those were before the days of cell phones that I could record you in my pocket. But Michael Jackson had vitiligo, without a doubt. And I wrote a little article for the newspaper on the day that he died to say that it's such a shame that an icon like this had vitiligo and did not come out about it, because he could have been the voice for every vitiligo sufferer world over to show them that you don't need to be scared or ashamed to show that you actually have a skin disorder. And not only that, it goes further in that now we have, slowly but surely, more and more people are getting in tune with their skins and actually showing the world. There is now a supermodel who has vitiligo, and she's decided that she will not camouflage it, she will not cover it up, and in fact she's now been driving a lot of the sort of Love Your Skin campaign, and actually goes onto the catwalk in this beautiful checkered look of hers to show people that there's nothing to be afraid of. Michael Jackson, incidentally, and I don't want to harp on this, but his vitiligo started on his hand, on his right hand, as a small spot, okay? It then started spreading, and he had asymmetrical vitiligo, so he didn't get it on the other hand. It then started spreading. And if you follow the life of Michael Jackson, you will notice that at a particular point, and vitiligo generally starts on the extremities. So it starts on the hands, starts on the feet, and then spreads. At a particular point, he started wearing a glove. On what hand? On his right hand. And that was to cover up that vitiligo. He then suddenly started wearing slightly longer socks. He just made his pants shorter so you could actually see his sequin socks. But the socks were also to cover the vitiligo that started spreading on his feet. At a particular point, if you don't have it, if you do not accept the therapy, or if you don't have it therapeutically slowed down or stopped or reversed, in fact, sometimes the vitiligo is refractory to therapy, and that's just unfortunate. But some patients respond very well and others don't. In Michael Jackson's case, he did not respond very well to therapy, so his vitiligo continued to spread. At a particular point, a dermatologist will give you the choice of, if you've got 70 to 75% vitiligo spread, you've got 25% of your original skin color left, they will ask you, do you want to actually depigment the rest of the body so that you're entirely light, okay? So that you don't have the checkered look. Michael Jackson took that option. And so he went entirely white in order to hide the vitiligo that was spreading. And so that was Michael Jackson's story. His nose, eyes, lips, I have no idea about, okay? I'm not a plastic surgeon. That was his choice. I just wanted to tell you about the vitiligo. And so we left with the question of, why then is this melanin so important? Now, for that, we need to look at a little bit of sun, okay? Incoming solar radiation strikes the Earth, all over the Earth, obviously, at various angles. And this is part of the point that I want to stress here. But incoming solar radiation, and let me just point to what I'm talking about. When we look at incoming solar radiation as 100%, half of it is absorbed at the surface, okay? Quite a large percentage is reflected, is absorbed in the atmosphere. Quite a large percentage is reflected off the Earth's surface and absorbed by the clouds and the surrounding atmosphere. Now, it is important to have sun. We'll talk about that in a second. But when you look at the visible light spectrum, it is important to notice that the visible light spectrum is, of course, made up of your visible light, and the entire light spectrum also includes the UV, the ultraviolet range. And the ultraviolet range is what comes from the sun. And so when we look at the ultraviolet range, we're talking generally about 3 ultraviolet wavelengths: ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, and ultraviolet C. So UVA, UVB, and UVC. Okay, you've seen UVA and UVB on your sunscreens, and we're going to get to that now. These 3 wavelengths, and actually only 2 of them, because I'll show you that UVC doesn't actually get through our atmosphere that much. But UVA and UVB are the 2 wavelengths that cause mass destruction biologically to skins in general. And so it is very important. I put this picture on the bottom left up here because I wanted to just stress. This comes from Nina Jablonski's book, and it talks about the evolution of skin color, and she did extensive anthropological research, and they've shown really very solidly, and looking at the different populations. I mean, it's a wonderful job because she has to go all around the world in order to gather her data. But part of it is that as the sun strikes the Earth, and of course the Earth is round, and so the sun will strike at a particular angle during certain seasons. But generally, the sun strikes the Earth almost at a right angle, to the Earth at the equator, okay? And then you can imagine, if this is the globe, that the sun's rays sort of hit it like that, okay? And what they found with their research is that the darkest people really are concentrated in the areas where the sun strikes the Earth full on, okay? As you start to change that angle, you get less sun, you get less absorbance, you get less irradiated sun. You can literally categorize skin color as it has evolutionarily adapted to less and less sun. And so it became important then to realize that melanin has to play a role, because the people in equatorial Africa, for example, and also in these regions over here, are particularly dark. And they're dark for the reason that they have inherently, they need protection against the very high levels of UV radiation. And so they have, naturally, lots of melanin, okay? And as we look at the populations of people, as we go south and as we go north, and as we go particularly further north, the skins get lighter and lighter. Why? Because their radiation is less. And so evolutionarily, they don't need that heavy amounts of pigment. Now, of course, this is lovely in theory, and it does work. However, and if you were 20 million years ago and you had no movement of people, this would be exactly how the world most likely would still look, right? But of course, migration is, due to all different circumstances, introduces movements of people en masse. And so yes, if you take a ship and you grab a whole lot of people here and you decide that they need to work for you, you put them on the ship and you drag them across the ocean and they land up here, then you're going to find dark people over here, okay? Which is not entirely in the zone that they are made for, but they have been moved there, and generally they will locate there and raise their families there and stay there. In the same way that you get, essentially, one can ask, why are we getting so many dark people, say, in Sweden and Norway? Well, the ancestors moved there, okay, for some reason, whether it be a job, whether it be romance, whatever, they find themselves there. And so you can distribute that according to where melanin was actually needed the most. Why? Because of the UV irradiation. Now, I just throw this in here because we'll look at this in a bit more detail. But this is your skin, okay? This is your skin. This is your epidermis. This is your dermis, the pink part. You will see that I've shown that UVA tracks all the way through to the dermis, which is important to remember, and that UVB goes up to the end of the epidermis. Okay, and I'll come back there. That's a melanocyte in blue, and these are the keratinocytes surrounding them. The cell is not blue, though, by the way, on the microscope. Okay, so Nina Jablonski and her husband, George Chaplin, who is a geographer, also found that if you measure UV irradiation over the Earth, and they were particularly interested in South Africa, they found that on the 11th of January, and this is no joke actually, they really have the data to prove it, and I've read the paper. The 11th of January is the day that South Africa has the most UV radiation of the year, okay? And so if you can, well, we've missed it, clearly, but if you can, and I asked Mehdi to make the summer school a little bit earlier so I could actually warn you, but no. The 11th of January is the day to stay out of the sun, particularly. And of course, the 11th of January is where just about everyone in Cape Town heads for the beach. But that is, it has been pinpointed right down to that. So the next question is, what affects the amount of UV that we are exposed to? And cloud cover certainly affects it. As I said to you earlier, the clouds absorb a lot of the UV, and particularly dark cloud cover, just about 50%. Ozone in the stratosphere. Now, ozone is O3. Ozone absorbs a lot of the UVC wavelength, and that's why we don't generally get UVC irradiating on the Earth. Of course, we've got a thinning of the ozone, not exactly a hole, I don't think, but we've got certain thinning of the ozone layer, and in those areas, I would imagine, and I'm not the expert here, but the ozone would obviously, the UVC radiation would obviously be slightly more potentially in those areas. The oblique angle of the sunlight we spoke about, and then altitude, okay? the higher you are, the higher your country really is situated. You can also get a fair amount of irradiation in that way. And then dust and smoke. Smog absorbs UV ridiculously. I mean, it is not supposed to be there, the smog and the smoke. But in India, for example, the smog and smoke is so high that they actually struggle, and we'll come to that as well, they struggle with their vitamin D synthesis, okay, for which you need UVB. And so we'll talk about that in a short while. So those are the three wavelengths. And if you were to break them down or categorize them as to the amounts, you'll see that UVA, that we get 90% of the three wavelengths is UVA on the Earth, 10% is UVB, and really 0% is UVC because it's absorbed. So let's talk a little bit more about UVA and UVB. Now, the interesting thing about UVA, and I've already alluded to this, is that it is a wavelength of about 320 to 400 nanometers. It is the longer of the two wavelengths versus UVA versus UVB. It is the longer of the two wavelengths and therefore reaches the further into the skin, okay? So UVA reaches from the surface all the way through to the dermis. Now, you will remember that yesterday, when I showed you the dermis, I said the dermis consists of blood vessels, nerves, and your glands, and a whole lot of other structural components that give your skin its structure and its elasticity. The problem is that the UVA wavelength reaches right into the dermis and so directly affects your blood vessels, okay? And we'll look at that now. It is the least energetic in terms of the two wavelengths, but it is harmful, and it is harmful in excess, all right? Like anything, in moderation, because it destroys the collagen and elastin, which we never spoke about, and I don't want to dwell on too much, but the collagen and elastin in your skin is what gives your skin its structure. It is these compounds, it is these proteins that break down over time, and it's called aging. And these compounds, as the sun, particularly UVA, accelerates the breakdown of these compounds. And so yes, you can clearly see an aged skin versus somebody that has looked after their skin, somebody that has spent a lot of time in the sun, and sometimes it's unavoidable because you may be an outside worker, like a gardener or something like that. You can literally see the difference between the structure of their skin, and I'm talking about the substructure of their skins versus those that have worked indoors. And they've done those studies, looking at office workers' skins versus, outside environmental workers' skins, etc. And so UVA, whilst needed, is also a destroyer of the structure of the skin. It also passes the Earth's atmosphere almost unfiltered. And that's also an important point, and that's why it is energetic. It is less energetic than UVB, but it is not filtered in any way. So it's pretty strong. The other point is that the amount that reaches the Earth's surface stays constant through the seasons and the time of day. So you cannot even say, and we'll talk a little bit about the time of day, but you cannot say that UVA particularly, I'm going to go to the beach in the morning and I'm going to spend 4 hours at the beach and then run inside because I don't want so much UVA. No, UVA is constant, is more constant than UVB through the seasons and the time of day. The last point is an interesting point that I thought I'd just add. It is not filtered by glass. And so people think that if you've got glass, you would have to polarize the glass to prevent UVA from coming through, okay? And so natural spectacles, but more importantly, windows of cars, for example, do not filter out UVA. And so they've done this wonderful study they call it a split face study, where they looked at the one side of truck drivers who have been driving many kilometers throughout the States and through Europe, they've looked at the side that actually faces the sun. Generally, these truck drivers, because of the speeds that they really travel fast. I've been driving, behind them and between them in the States, for example. They have the windows rolled up, thinking that is protecting them with the aircon on inside. Well, they're drying out the cabin, and they're not filtering the UVA away. So, and it clearly shows on the one side that where they face the sun, that it has completely damaged their skin, and particularly the structure of their skin. UVB, on the other hand, is a shorter wavelength. It has lower energy levels. It is still energetic, but with slightly lower. It has lower energy levels than UVC. The point of UVB is that it is, and we do call it the bad one, UV bad. It destroys DNA directly. Okay, deoxyribonucleic acid, the essential genetic material of all cells that all cells are made of, all living cells, can be destroyed directly by UVB. The amount of research that has gone into how UVB destroys DNA is just incredible, right? It will take me months to talk to you about. But the point is that there are in fact certain parts of your DNA that the UVB can actually bind directly to, okay, and enhance the damage. Fortunately, our cells have an inherent ability to repair themselves, okay, but it is only to a limited extent. At a particular point, just like if somebody knocks you, you get up. Somebody knocks you again, you get up. They'll knock you and you'll stay down, okay? The same with the cells. They'll get a knock. While they're a young cell, they get up very quickly. As you go through your middle ages, you knock, you get up a little bit slowly, but you still get up. As you get older, a knock, boom, takes you out, okay? Actually damages the cell, either kills the cell or damages it that when it repairs itself, it does not repair itself properly. And that's where the problem starts. So UVB, only a proportion of it, about 10%, gets to the Earth's surface, but it is the most damaging UV of them all. Now, another interesting study showed that if you were to compare the UV irradiation, and this was UVB exposure, and I know this is very old, it was 1994 to 1998, but the study only, I think, came out in 2003, 2004, where they looked over a 5-year period, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Over a 5-year period, they looked at the UV irradiation levels, and there's some marvelous ways that they measure it, and they measure it at different points, sort of slightly above sea level, at sea level, and inland, and etc. They showed very clearly that Cape Town, as wonderful as it is, actually has the highest UVB exposure in South Africa. Okay? It not only has a high level of UVB exposure, it also reflects UV quite highly. And so if you're standing in the shade on the beach, for example, white sand is known to reflect UV as much as snow does in the northern hemispheres. If you're standing in the shade, you mustn't forget that on a very hot day, between 12 and 3 o'clock, you're getting quite a large amount of irradiation reflecting off the sun still at your body. All right? So with that, don't be fooled by thinking that you're standing in the shade, that I'm completely safe. All right? You still need something that stops the UV. And so let's just talk a little bit for the next minute on how do we stop UV from damaging our skins. Well, one of it, of course, is using sunscreens. Now, sunscreens I love talking about, and I can talk for days on it because, as I told you, the pharmacist, the lady in the pharmacy runs when she sees me because I look for her. She doesn't come to me. But sunscreens really come in 2 batches, in 2 lots, or in 2 categories. You get absorptive sunscreens and you get reflective sunscreens, okay? An absorptive sunscreen is a sunscreen that is generally made to absorb into the skin very quickly, and what it does is it will neutralize the UV, right? It is made to do that. So what the UV will do is generate free radicals or oxidatively produced radicals in the skin. The compounds that is in the sunscreen actually neutralizes them, okay? But now, people forget that the absorption of creams into the skin has to take time. So you cannot exactly just rub it on and run into the sun, okay? You need to give yourself some time. And absorption depends on the age of your skin, all right? Because of course, if your skin is slightly wrinkled, the surface area is a little bit larger than if it's not, okay? And so you need to factor that in that you need to give yourself a little bit more time for the cream to absorb. And so generally, the rule of thumb is that you rub on cream and you wait for half an hour before you go into the sun. And so, yeah, this is the other thing that I laugh for. You know, you go to the beach and these people are standing in the sun just rubbing on these creams and they are rubbing it everywhere. And I'm thinking, folks, you are burning as you're doing that. I mean, really. You need to rub it on at home, right? So that when you're stuck in the traffic on your way to the beach, it is actually starting to work already. It is getting absorbed and it is starting to protect that layer of skin so that as you get into the sun, it can do its job. Now, the other two factors that people forget about all the time relating to sunscreens is that sweat neutralizes sunscreens, okay? And so you need to reapply. The bit on the bottle that says reapply is not just a gimmick to add more cream so that they can sell more. It actually does work, right? You need to reapply after about an hour because your skin has already started to break down the absorptive sunscreen. And then the other factor is just general washing off of the sunscreen. So if it has not absorbed and you go jump in the water, when you get out of the water, and don't forget we generally jump into salt water or into chlorinated water, you're destroying the sunscreen, right? You're destroying it over time. And so as you get out, the need to reapply remains the same. And so you do need to reapply. The other types of sunscreens that we get are the reflective sunscreens. These work very well because they reflect the UVA and the UVB. These are generally have a heavy metal involved in them. So we either put titanium in them and make titanium oxide, or we put copper in them to make copper oxide, or we put in, what's the third one? Zinc, thank you. Zinc. So it's zinc, copper, or titanium. They are oxides, and they sit on the skin. They don't effectively get absorbed into the skin. They just sit on it, and they're supposed to sit on it because they reflect the UV off the skin, and that's part of the idea that the metals do. Okay, so UVA is our aging, and so if you'll never forget it after this, right? UVA, A, aging, UVB, B, burning, and so the UVA wavelength is the one that actually damages the collagen and the underlying parts of the skin. It gets further into the dermis and creates aging. UVB, or the burning wavelength, this was a friend of a friend, and he wrote with a reflective sunscreen. If you can't see from the back, he wrote the word rad on his back, and then proceeded to go lay in the sun on Clifton Beach for an hour so that he could see whether he's so. Fitzpatrick, skin type 102, does not burn, just gets red, and so the words rad are on his back. I paraphrased it and I said, you're an idiot, rad is bad. Because you do not want to burn like this, okay? You do not want to get that red in any sun. And, you know, coming off the beach and just seeing all the British tourists walking around, they look like lobsters, folks. It is just not good. So, and you're really doing a fair amount of damage to your skin. There are 2 points here that I want to raise. In the dermatological world, they talk about an MED. And MEDs are minimal erythemal doses. What it simply means is that erythema is red, and so it is the minimal reddening dose that your skin can take. And this is one of the ways in which you can profile your own skin, okay? And that you can decide on what cream works for you. Your minimal erythemal dose is just that amount of UV exposure needed before you start, just as your skin starts to get red. Now, if your skin does not get red, the other consequence is that it will start to tingle. So my skin, for example, tingles and gets a bit itchy. Then I know that I've reached my 1 MED, okay? And so a good experiment to do, because, you know, the world is full of researchers, a good experiment to do is to take an area of your skin that is generally quite UV exposed, and to go into the sun, because generally the areas that are not UV exposed, the most un-UV exposed area, do you know where that is? Okay, I was going to answer before anyone shouted out bad words, is under the arm, right here. And so the part that is sort of sits against your body. And we generally use that as the baseline for non-UV exposed skin. But if you take an area that is generally UV exposed and you go into the sun and you take a stopwatch with you, so go into the sun between 12 and 3, which is the high UV radiated region, and as you walk out, you press start, okay? And you hold your arm like this in the sun, right? In the direct sunlight. As soon as you start feeling the tingling, or as soon as you start seeing reddening, you stop the clock, okay? That is your MED. Now, why am I telling you this? Because you just need 1 MED to tan, right? And so generally, people expose themselves to 3, 4, 5 MEDs, thinking that the longer they are going to be in the sun, the better they're going to tan. Well, the longer they are in the sun, the more damage they're actually doing to their cells, and the harder their cells are working to try to repair, okay? So 1 MED is literally what you need. And then you will have a reasonable idea of how long to fry the steak, right? Because that's what we're doing, right? Let's face it. We're frying the steak. And so you will know that with 1 MED, you're either just going to sizzle it, right, and out of the sun, or you're going to have it a bit medium rare, and then out of the sun. And believe it or not, it is when you get out of the sun that the activation of the cells actually occur, the melanin transfer occurs, and you actually get your tan. So you're actually tanning in the shade, believe it or not. So that's minimal erythemal dose. The other one is sun protection factor, and this people always struggle with as well. Sunscreens will say SPF 50, SPF 30, SPF 25, SPF 100. Okay, so first of all, you do not get an SPF 100, and you can actually quote me on that. The sun protection factor generally only goes up to about 40, 45, 50 maximum. So what does that mean? Generally, sun protection factors are related to how long the cream claims that you are protected. Now, some people will define it as a multiple. Others will define it as minutes added. What do I mean by that? Some people will say that a SPF 30 gives you 30 times the protection that your skin would normally inherently have, okay? Which means, effectively, that if your 1 MED is 5 minutes, okay, is 5 minutes, or let's say 3 minutes, that a SPF 30 allows you to go into the sun for 90 minutes before you get damage. Absolutely not, okay? Absolutely not. The rule of thumb is generally that if you apply a cream and you give it time to absorb, generally you can add on the amount of SPF as minutes to your skin, okay, to your MED. And so your sun protection factor with a SPF of 20, if your one MED is 5 minutes, if you go 5 minutes and you start to redden and you add a factor 30, then you could theoretically sit in the sun for 35 minutes, okay? But then remember that you mustn't sweat, you mustn't go into water, and you mustn't be doing a whole lot of activities. You're just sitting there. So in general, SPF is effective, but it takes a bit of awareness as to what your skin type is and what your MED is. And so when I walk into the pharmacy, that's the first thing I ask the lady. So, do you know what my MED is? And she looks at me. MED? I said, you need to know what my MED is so that you can sell me a cream that has an SPF for me so that I know how long I can be in the sun to protect myself before I damage my cells. And that generally gets her running in the other direction already. So the question then is, so if the sun is so bad, why not stay out of it completely? And the reason is, very simply, that we desperately need the sun. Without the sun, we die. Okay? All life will cease to exist. The Earth will go into an ice age, and we'll die. But biologically, in the skin, UVB is an exceptionally important ultraviolet radiation wavelength because we need UVB for two things. We need it for lots of things, but let me highlight two things. One is wound healing. UVB activates the immune system, okay? It activates the immune system, and so it is generally a very good radiated wavelength in moderation to accelerate wound healing. And there are lots of studies. That's just one of a hand, which they've actually UVB irradiated in very small amounts over time, and they've showed how it has accelerated the healing. The other most important part is that UVB is needed for vitamin D synthesis. So let me just highlight vitamin D for the last minute or two. Vitamin D synthesis is needed in just about everywhere. If we ask what is it and where to get it, vitamin D, and that's the precursor, which I won't talk a lot about, dehydrocholesterol. It is a part of your cholesterol pathway. It is found in the epidermal layer of the skin, right? It is made inherently by the skin. So it sits there. But it sits there in an inactive form, in a form that cannot be used until it is broken by UVB. So you can have all the vitamin D you want. Without the sun, it means nothing, all right? So you have to expose yourself to sunlight. We also get it in the diet. We also get it through dietary supplements. And so you can, there are lots on the shelves, vitamin D. Of course, vitamin D is also one of those vitamins that if you're lacking it, a supplement will help you to the point that you need it, and then everything else you'll either secrete in the urine or in the feces. And so it won't, if you have an excess, if you've forgotten that you've taken your vitamin D tablets in the morning and you take it again in the afternoon, it won't really cause major hassles. The functions. Vitamin D really has a wide range of functions, often referred to as the sunshine vitamin, because it gives you that euphoric feeling when you've got enough vitamin D, and you probably know this if you get that first ray of sunshine on your face in the morning with that cup of coffee, everything just looks a lot brighter and nicer as you go into the day. We use it to strengthen and build bones. It is highly important in calcium metabolism. There are studies that have shown that it protects against cancers at a particular level, protects against heart disease, autoimmune diseases, diseases of the immune system. It also acts to prevent high blood pressure because the vitamin D also acts on the same cells that control your blood pressure, the same cells in your blood vessels that control your blood pressure. And it has also been shown, not entirely, but in an associative way, to prevent diabetes, or to at least slow down the metabolism of glucose and help in the production of insulin. So there are lots, and there are a few more. I've just listed a couple of them, but this is why we need vitamin D, and this is why we need sunshine. And this slide I just took out of one of my physiology lectures, so I'm not going to bore you with it. All I wanted to show you was that the vitamin D travels from the skin to the liver, where it's converted, to the kidney, and then to all the organs in the body where it's needed. And if it does not get sunlight, it does not follow that path, okay? It just sits in the skin. And so that 7-dehydrocholesterol remains there if not activated by sunlight. A quick story is that in the UK, they are struggling, particularly the kids, with their vitamin D levels. They actually have run a campaign where they're trying to increase the vitamin D levels in the kids, and it's a simple reason. The kids are waking up in the morning, they're indoors, they then go to school. A lot of them don't walk anymore. They get on Ubers, they get into Ubers, and then they go to school. They're in school the whole day. During the break, when you're supposed to go outside, you know, my mother always used to say, go get some fresh air. When you're supposed, and I think she was more frustrated with us just being in the house, but anyway, when you're supposed to go out and get that sun, which is important for your vitamin D, they go to the computer rooms and they play computer games whole day. You do not get UV radiation off a screen, okay? And then by the time they leave, the sun has already set or has in fact lost. A lot of the clouds have come over. If you ever see the sun in the UK, please let me know where you were. But by the time they get home, and this is repeated. And so through winter, there is a radical drop in the vitamin D levels in these kids in the UK. And vitamin D, of course, is very important for bone and for calcium metabolism and for bone development. And so let me just go off that. And so, folks, in the last minute that I have, we've got 3 more minutes. I return to my frequently asked questions area, and I thought that I would just introduce you to 2 more frequently asked questions. And one of your colleagues have given me a sheet with a couple of questions on, which I will get to through the course of this week, maybe not today. But the question is, how do I protect my skin? Essentially, we've already spoken about the UV creams and etc. But skin, like anything, is a piece of leather, okay? And if you've got a bag, like a beautiful leather bag or beautiful leather shoes, we have to look after our skins in exactly the same way. Who moisturizes? Right. Now, I see the guys have their hands like here, and the women have their hands like right up here. Please, guys, be loud and proud. I moisturize, and there's nothing wrong with moisturizing. You're more of a man when you moisturize. Your skin is like that old pair of shoes, okay? If you let it get to that state, it will treat you with that state. By the way, just an anecdote here is when we test your skin and the effect of a moisturizer, how beautifully moisturized your skin is, we generally go for one particular area. Do you know what area that is? We generally look at your elbow. And so if you've got a soft elbow, then you know that you're doing a decent job on your moisturizing. If not, you need to pick up your moisturizing regime. And so we really want to do that. And Yes, sir. I will allow you to touch my elbow afterwards. We want to do that. And we do that through simple rules. Stay out of the sun between 12 and 3. Cape Town has exceptionally high irradiation levels. If you are going to go into